The gangplank slams down with the force of a guillotine. It's late 1943, and the air on the docks of Newport News, Virginia is thick with salt, coal smoke, and the heavy silence of surrender. Chains rattle, a mournful sound against the hiss of steam from a nearby Liberty ship. A long column of men in dusty, faded uniforms shuffles forward. These are the veterans of the Afrika Korps, the hardened soldiers of Rommel's Desert Army, now prisoners of war on American soil. Among them is Obergefreiter Klaus Richter, a Panzergrenadier from the 15th Panzer Division. His diary, tucked inside his tunic, is already filled with entries of heat, sand, and the bitter taste of defeat at El Alamein. He keeps his eyes down, expecting the worst. Propaganda had painted a grim picture of American captors, brutal, vengeful, degenerate. He braces himself for the inevitable shouts, the prods of a rifle butt, but then a single gloved hand is raised. The column halts. Klaus looks up, and the world tilts on its axis. The man who stopped them, the man whose authority is absolute in this moment, is a black American soldier. An MP. His uniform is immaculate, his posture straight, his gaze steady and professional. He doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. His quiet command is more powerful than any threat. Klaus watches, mesmerized, as the MP directs the flow of prisoners with crisp hand signals. Around him, his comrades exchange uneasy glances. Their faces, tanned and weathered by the African sun, now show a mixture of confusion and disbelief. This is impossible. This contradicts everything they were taught, everything they fought for. The Reich's ideology had drawn rigid lines, creating a pyramid of humanity with them near the top and this man somewhere far below. Yet here, on this windswept dock, the pyramid has been inverted. The man they were told was inferior now holds their lives in his hands, enforcing the laws of his country with unwavering competence. Days later, Klaus is crammed into a train car, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels a constant reminder of his journey into the unknown. The American heartland scrolls past the window, a landscape so vast and green it seems almost alien after the endless beige of the desert. He and his fellow POWs are guarded by more Black MPs. They are polite, efficient, and distant. They hand out rations, check the locks, and stand their posts with a discipline that would be admired in any army. At a stop in a small, dusty town somewhere in the south, Klaus sees it for the first time. Two water fountains, side by side. One has a sign that reads white. The other, colored. He sees black civilians stepping away from the white entrance to the station. A few of his comrades snicker, a familiar ugly sound. But Klaus feels a knot of confusion tighten in his gut. Just this morning, he had watched a white American lieutenant, a man of officer rank, return a sharp salute to their black sergeant. In the structured world of the U.S. Army, rank and duty seemed to transcend race. But out here, in the civilian world, the rules were different, crueler. Klaus presses his forehead against the cool glass of the window, trying to make sense of the contradictions. These black soldiers were his guards, his superiors in this strange new reality. They wore the uniform of the victor, carried the weapons, and held the authority of the state. Yet just beyond the train tracks, they were subject to a segregation that echoed the very ideology his own nation had championed. It was a paradox that gnawed at him, unsettling the foundations of his worldview more than any battle had. As the train lurches forward again, plunging deeper into the American night, Klaus looks at the silhouette of the guard standing at the end of the car. The MP is a shadow against the fading light, a silent, powerful figure whose very presence challenges everything Klaus thought he knew about power, race, and the country that was now his prison. The rhythmic click-clack of the wheels on the track sounds like a question, repeated over and over, with no answer in sight. He was a prisoner of America, but he was also becoming a witness to its deepest, most baffling conflict. The journey had just begun. The rattling of the train car is a constant, a rhythm that has rocked me for days. Dawn breaks, painting the sky in shades of gray and pale orange. The grimy industrial silhouettes outside the window have slowly melted away, replaced by endless fields of cotton and ramshackle wooden houses. A world so different from the one I left behind. A black military policeman moves down the aisle. His movements are precise, almost mechanical. He checks the cuffs on another prisoner, his expression unreadable. He stops by me, handing over a small wax paper-wrapped packet. "Breakfast," he says, his voice clipped and professional. He doesn't meet my eyes. He's just a uniform, a duty. But as the train slows, pulling into a dusty depot, I see something that shatters that illusion. Through the window on the crowded platform, another group of soldiers. They are black, like him. An officer, a white man with a red face and a swagger stick, barks orders, herding them towards a separate, dilapidated train car at the very back. They go without protest. Their faces a mixture of resignation and quiet anger. The MP in my car turns his head away from the window, his jaw tight. For the first time, I sense a crack in his disciplined facade. The contradiction hangs in the air, thick and confusing. We finally arrive. A sign reads, Camp Swift, Texas. The air is thick with heat and the smell of pine and dust. The days here fall into a monotonous rhythm. The blare of a bugle before sunrise. Roll call, our names butchered by an American sergeant. The grim task of cleaning the latrines. Then work details. We are marched out under the Texas sun, repairing roads or clearing land, watched over by guards, both black and white. It's on one of these work details that the strangeness of this country truly hits me. We're digging a ditch by a main road. A dusty pickup truck pulls over and a white civilian gets out. He starts yelling at a black sergeant who is overseeing our crew, jabbing a finger in his face, his voice dripping with contempt. You tell your boys to move that pile of dirt now. The sergeant stands his ground, his back ramrod straight. Sir, we have our orders. The civilian sputters, his face turning purple. Just then, a jeep pulls up. The camp commandant, a white major, steps out. He listens for a moment, his eyes cold. Then he turns to the civilian. This is Sergeant Williams, the commandant says, his voice like chipped ice. He is in charge of this detail, under my authority. If you have a problem, you take it up with me. Otherwise, get back in your truck. The civilian stares, speechless, then scurries away. Sergeant Williams gives the commandant a crisp salute. The commandant returns it, then drives off. No words are exchanged, but the message is clear. A line has been drawn, a strange, invisible boundary I cannot comprehend. Later that week, we are transported in the back of a truck. We pass a small roadside cafe. Joe's Diner, the sign says. The driver, a young white corporal, pulls over. 5 minutes, he grunts. He leads us inside. A woman with tired eyes serves us coffee and slices of pie at a back table. We are prisoners of war, the enemy, yet we are served. As we eat, a different truck, a large military transport, pulls up. 2 black soldiers, their uniforms covered in dust, get out and walk to the door. The woman from behind the counter meets them on the steps. She shakes her head. They can't come in. They argue for a moment, their voices low but tense. Finally, they turn away, their shoulders slumped, and get back in their truck. They sit there for a moment, staring at us through the window, then drive away. I look down at my coffee, the taste suddenly bitter in my mouth. One evening, I am assigned to a cleaning duty near the guard towers. From one of the towers, I can hear a voice, relaxed and conversational. It's a black guard, maybe the same one from the train. He's talking to another guard, a white soldier. They're not talking about the war or about us. They're talking about baseball, about a player named Jackie Robinson. They talk about their pay, how it's never enough. The sun beat down, hot and sticky, a world away from the frozen mud of the Eastern Front. Here, in the heart of America, I wasn't a soldier anymore, not really. I was a prisoner, yes, but also a laborer. We were marched out past the wire, our boots sinking into the rich, dark soil of a cotton field. They needed hands, we had hands, it was that simple. Our guards weren't always the white soldiers from the camp. Sometimes they were black GIs. Men whose authority was as clear and sharp as the glint of sun on their rifle barrels. I remember one foreman, an older black man, his face a roadmap of long days under this same sun. His name was Elias. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. He'd walk the rows, showing us with his own calloused hands how to pick the bowls clean without getting pricked. One afternoon, during a water break, he sat on an overturned crate near me. He unwrapped a piece of bread from a cloth, tore it in half, and offered me a piece. No words, just a nod. We ate in silence, the only sounds the buzz of insects, and the distant chug of a tractor. A simple act, but it felt significant. It was a shared moment of humanity that defied everything I had been taught. Back in Germany, the propaganda painted a very specific picture of America and its people. But here the lines were blurred, redrawn in ways I couldn't comprehend. I read letters from other prisoners, men in camps across the country. One, quoted by the historian Arnold Kramer, wrote about how stunned he was to see white soldiers saluting black NCOs. He described the Black Military Police as competent and fair. These weren't the subservient, inferior people from our textbooks. These were men who carried themselves with a dignity and authority that demanded respect. They were soldiers, just like us. Yet, outside the structure of the military, America was a land of baffling contradictions. On a Sunday, a local church invited a group of us prisoners for a supper. We were welcomed, fed fried chicken and potato salad by smiling women who saw us not as the enemy, but as lost boys far from home. But the black soldiers who guarded us, the men who shared our long work days, were not invited. They weren't allowed in that church hall. Later, we were taken to a movie in town. A reward for good work. We, the prisoners of war, were given seats on the main floor. But when a black family came in, they were directed up a separate staircase to the balcony. I sat there, in my enemy uniform, watching an American film in a comfortable seat, while American citizens were segregated above me. The very people fighting and dying under the same flag were treated as less than the prisoners they were guarding. It made no sense. News from the wider war trickled in through newspapers and radio broadcasts. We heard whispers of the Red Ball Express, a massive convoy of mostly black drivers racing supplies across France to the front lines. We read about the Tuskegee Airmen, black pilots escorting bombers over Italy, their planes painted with red tails, never losing a single bomber they protected. We saw citations for bravery awarded to all black units who had held the line against incredible odds. Each story was like a small crack in the thick wall of my own indoctrinated beliefs. The world was far more complex than I had ever imagined. The neat, orderly categories of race and worth I had carried with me from Germany were crumbling under the weight of daily reality. Tonight, I sit with a pen and a blank sheet of paper, the monthly letter home. I usually write about the food, the weather, that I am safe, but this time the words won't come. How can I explain this place? How can I describe the foreman who shared his bread, the guard who earned my respect, the baffling injustice of a town that welcomes its enemy but segregates its own? I stare at the paper, and all I can think to write is that the things I was so sure of, the things I was told were undeniable truths about the world, they don't seem so true anymore. Here, under the American sun, everything is different. The air in the camp crackled, a low hum of tension you could feel in your teeth. We were marching to work assignments, our boots crunching on the dusty Indiana road. Up ahead, a commotion. A white foreman, his face beet red and twisted with rage, was shouting at one of our youngest, a boy from Bavaria, barely 18. The kid had made a mistake with some machinery, a simple slip-up, but the foreman was lunging, his fists clenched, ready to strike. We all froze, expecting the familiar crack of a fist on bone, but then a figure stepped between them. Tall, broad-shouldered, a black sergeant from the military police detachment. He didn't shout. He didn't draw a weapon. He just stood there, a wall of quiet authority. "That's enough," he said, his voice low and steady, a rumble that cut through the foreman's tirade. The foreman sputtered, pointing a shaking finger. "This is my crew!" The sergeant didn't even look at the foreman. His eyes were on the boy, calm and assessing. "The prisoner is under my watch," he stated, not as a threat, but as a fact. "He returns to camp, now?" The foreman stared, his anger deflating like a punctured tire against the sergeant's unyielding presence. He backed away, muttering. The sergeant turned to the boy, nodded once, and gestured back toward the column. The incident was over in seconds, but the image was seared into my mind. This man, in this uniform, had protected me, his enemy, from another American. Days later, I saw him by the barracks, cleaning his rifle. I gathered my courage and approached. "Sergeant," I started, my English clumsy. He looked up, his expression unreadable. I gestured back toward the work site. "Thank you." "For the boy." He nodded slowly, continuing to wipe down the barrel. I had to know. Why? He paused, then looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. "He's just a kid," he said simply. "War makes enough monsters. We don't need to be them." We stood in silence for a moment. Then, driven by a curiosity I couldn't explain, I asked his name. "Sergeant Davis," he said. "And you?" I told him mine. Over the next few weeks, we talked. Small conversations, fragments of lives. He showed me a worn photograph he kept in his wallet, a smiling woman and a small child sitting on a porch swing. He'd read lines from her letters, his voice softening. We discovered we both loved fishing. He laughed once, a deep, genuine sound, at a story I told about my father. It was a strange, impossible friendship, blooming behind barbed wire. The nights grew colder. We could hear the rumble of the war's endgame through the camp's shortwave radio. Allied bombs over the Ruhr Valley. The brutal winter in the Ardennes. The relentless push toward Berlin. Every report felt like a nail being hammered into the coffin of our former lives. The guards grew tense, the news from home more dire. But my world had shrunk to this small patch of American soil, and the paradoxes were dizzying. One evening, we were trucked into town for a USO dance. The hall was filled with music and laughter. White townsfolk, women and old men, smiled at us, offered us refreshments. They welcomed us, the enemy in work-worn fatigues. Then a group of black soldiers, Sergeant Davis among them, walked in. The music faltered. A hush fell. A town official quickly and quietly told them to leave. They weren't welcome. I watched Sergeant Davis turn, his back straight, his face a mask of stone, and walk out into the night. I, the prisoner, was allowed to stay while he, the guard, was cast out. The cognitive dissonance was a physical sickness in my gut. He wore the same uniform, fought for the same flag, yet in that room, I was more welcome than him. The final days of April were a blur of static and rumor. The news from the radio was chaotic, fragmented. Then, one afternoon, the static cleared for a moment. A clipped, official voice announced it. Hitler was dead. A strange silence fell over the entire camp. We stood frozen, looking at each other, then at the wire fences, then at the American guards. The world had just tilted on its axis. The war was over. That evening, Sergeant Davis stood at the edge of the compound, staring out at the setting sun. The wire between us hummed with the whispers of surrender. I walked to the fence, my heart pounding. This man had saved a boy from a beating. He had shown me a picture of his family. He had been thrown out of a hall I was welcomed into. He was my guard, my protector, my friend. He would give us our orders in the morning. And I realized with a sudden, gut-wrenching clarity that whatever he said next might be the last order I would ever take in America. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. The barbed wire fences of Camp Clinton couldn't contain the roar. American guards cheered, their voices raw with relief. From the barracks, German POWs joined in, a strange, complicated chorus of men glad the war was over, even in defeat. But in a quiet corner of the yard, away from the celebration, a different kind of peace was being made. The German prisoner, the one who arrived convinced of his own superiority, stood before the black sergeant who had so thoroughly dismantled his worldview. There were no soaring speeches, no sentimental embraces. Just two soldiers, their uniforms representing opposing sides of a global conflict, their skin representing a different older one. The prisoner reached out his hand. It was a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of everything unsaid. "Thank you," he said, the English words stiff and practiced, but sincere. He then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, carved bird contraband he'd hidden for months, a piece of home he could have kept. He placed it in the sergeant's hand. "I will remember your name," he promised. "Sergeant Williams," the sergeant nodded, his expression unreadable but for a flicker of something in his eyes. He took the bird, closed his hand around it, and simply said, "Go home, son." This small, private moment was a microcosm of a much larger story. Over 1.2 million African Americans served in World War II. They were the legendary Tuskegee Airmen, dominating the skies. They were the Red Ball Express, a lifeline of supplies that kept the Allied advance moving, driving thousands of miles through hostile territory. They were the fearsome 761st Black Panther Tank Battalion, battling their way across Europe under General Patton. They were men like Sergeant Williams, who found themselves guarding the very ideologues who preached a doctrine of racial supremacy. For many German POWs, seeing these disciplined, professional black soldiers in positions of authority was a profound shock, a direct contradiction to the propaganda they had been fed their entire lives. The irony was staggering. While these soldiers were proving their valor and competence on a world stage, many would return home not to ticker tape parades, but to the familiar sting of segregation. They fought for a freedom abroad that they were still denied at home. The hypocrisy was not lost on the world or on many within America. The realities of wartime service, where skill and courage mattered more than skin color, made the old justifications for segregation ring hollow. It's no surprise that just 3 years later, in 1948, President Truman would sign Executive Order 9981, officially desegregating the U.S. Armed Forces. It wasn't a direct result of any single event, but the culmination of countless moments, countless proofs of equality that could no longer be ignored. Our German prisoner eventually returned to a homeland in ruins. He walked through streets that were mere skeletons of what he remembered. His own country, a landscape of defeat and shame. But amidst the rubble, he carried something new. A seed of an idea planted in a Mississippi field. The America he had witnessed inside that camp, a place where a black man could be his equal. His superior, even his keeper, was not the whole story. He would learn that later, but it was enough. It was enough to shatter the poisonous myth he had carried with him from Europe. It was proof that another way was possible. As he closes an old, worn diary, the sound of a child's laughter echoes down a rebuilt street. The war changed the map of the world, but it also redrew the maps inside individual hearts. These are the stories we strive to tell, the forgotten moments that reveal the true complexity of our shared history. If you want to uncover more untold stories from World War II that shaped our world in unexpected ways, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thank you for watching.